Welcome in, folks, to the art of Scumming. I hope this video finds you well. And don't forget that I'm making a push to 5,000 subscribers. If we make the goal of 5,000 subscribers by early June, then we're going to start scheduling live streaming events. If we make it to 10,000, then that first live stream will actually be a race that I've never played before. So currently there is a poll on the communities tab for that first live stream. You can basically vote on the race, and then there'll be another poll if we get close to that goal that will dictate which faction within that race. So anyway, get on that. Today, I want to do more Chaos Dwarfs, and we're taking a break from the army composition stuff. I wanted to talk specifically about settlements because I feel like there's a fair amount of capacity for confusion on the settlements and how you should build them, because there's a lot of hard, fast rules, and then there's a fair amount of exceptions. So the best place to start, I think, is this province here. I'm playing this campaign as the Disciples of Hashut, and all of the Chaos Dwarf lords in their starting province have this structure here. So you're going to have access to this structure. This is an important structure to prioritize the upgrading of, because it's just a really good return on investment as it relates to the amount of raw materials that you're going to be producing. Other than that, most of the rest of the settlements that you're going to come across are going to follow basically the build order that I've used in this province. You're going to want to also prioritize this building. Really good return on investment, just some raw materials, and you're going to continue to generate consistent income in the form of gold every single turn. Pretty important to prioritize this one. Now, wherever you have an iron resource, and we'll talk about some more resources that are important here in a minute, but this resource is really important because it's going to give you a fair amount of armaments, and in the early game, armaments are very expensive to produce. So you can see here that at tier 3, we can have access to this one, and it's producing some consistent armaments for us every turn. Let's look at the rest of the breakdown of the province, because, like, for instance, this one, depending on how often you're using the Bull Centaur stuff, in this particular campaign, I'm running Astrogoth with a Doom stack of renders, so this is advantageous for me. But other than that, if you're not doing that, then you may choose to just completely skip this one, but that's up to you. But the rest of the province composition, you can see that we have an outpost and a refiner, and a factory. And this is the general rule. You want to have, if you have the capacity in a 3 settlement province, you want to have a tower, you want to have an outpost, and you want to have a refinery. And these all kind of work together. So these ones upgrade for money, and then these ones use raw materials. So you kind of have like a consistent loop in here. You get money from this stuff over here, and money from here, and then that gets fed into here to produce this stuff. There's money produced there. So you can see that I've got raw materials and money. And then for the factory, generally speaking, I put factories on the perimeter of the province. So for instance, if we look at this fort here where it's situated, it's chosen as the factory because right off the bat, there's some ogres here that can turn hostile. So there were some defenses here. There was a garrison building here for a while that helped defend this region until I pacified the situation. So after that, you delete that building off, and then you can start working on some of the other stuff. A really important building that you should not discount the value of is this one right here, the tools manufactory, because this thing produces 30% raw materials for no additional cost. So if you look at any of these buildings, particularly this one that's producing a decent amount of raw materials every turn, I'm getting an additional 30% on that 500 material production with no additional cost. So that's a big deal. So keep that in mind. Now that, of course, applies to this building as well. So you want to make sure that even if you're focusing on raw material output, that you're producing at least one factory building in the province to be able to take that up to the next level and really make the situation more efficient. Now let's talk about armaments versus money, because we have the the weapons workshop, and then we have the refinery buildings. Armaments are really important, but they're expensive to produce. You focus on the armaments because you're going to basically in the early game only be able to really afford one of these buildings in the province, because you can't suck up 225 per turn and then an additional 225 per turn. Like, you're just, especially in the early game, you're going to hamstring your ability to build the provinces, because remember, this over here requires raw materials to go up. This does. It's expensive and difficult to acquire those if you're running both those buildings in any given province. So I would focus on the armaments, and then this one is your balance. It produces a lot of gold, but think of it like this. If I'm overproducing raw materials, then I want to build that refinery to kind of bring that back into balance. So if you're producing 10,000, my phone, not yours, sorry about that. If you're producing 10,000 raw materials, then yeah, maybe you want to balance that back a little bit. Maybe you're overproducing raw materials and you're growing more rapidly than you really need to. Then yeah, you could probably do with some extra cash. And as you can see, I'm on turn 66 and we're kind of in the runaway stage. So generally speaking, this is the makeup that I like to use for most provinces. You're going to have some kind of usually defenses, and if you're on the edge of your empire, in this particular instance, we can see that that is a centrally located province at this point in time. I don't need defenses in this region, but you could consider these two positions to be both your garrison and your Dreadquake battery. And then you're probably going to have one position for advanced military. And in this particular region, I was using it to recruit the Demon Smith sorcerers. We'll talk more about that in a separate video. Let's talk about exceptions, because there are some really good exceptions in the Mountains of Morn. You should almost always produce a tower. And the reason that you should almost always produce a tower is look at all those benefits. There are exceptions to that rule, though. If we go to the Great Hall of Greasus over here and look at the Ivory Road province, you can see that I have a balanced production between factory production and outposts. And the reason that I have not built a tower in this region is, regardless of how tall I build this building chain in this province, the capital will always be a 4-slot capital. So I've just chosen, because it is a region that is now bordered on all sides by friendlies. My territory. There's no reason to make this defensible, because it can just do its stuff. There's a lot of resources in this region. And again, these factories are going to get this building in both locations. That's going to give me plus 60% on these resource productions in the form of raw materials in the province. I said that we were talking about raw material or other resource productions. This is in addition to iron, gold is a really important one, because if we go all the way up to here, we're getting Lord Recruit rank +2 and Hero Recruit rank Hero Recruit rank +1, plus 500 income. That's a pretty good one. So you're going to want to focus on that. Other than that, I don't have any examples of this right now, but wine is another really good resource. All the rest of the resources are pretty much the same. Like if you look at the ivory production, 100, 150, 200. If we go over to, I believe it's this one. Yeah, the Mall Gate, which I haven't built it. 100, 150, 200. Plus the resource itself. Those ones aren't as impactful, but the wine increases the upkeep reduction for hobgoblins. So that can be stacked and really reduce the expenditure of your armies every single turn. So that's a really good resource to go after. Another really prolific exception would be something like this one. This is another one of those settlements that regardless of how tall you build that capital, you're going to produce only a 4-slot province. So you might as well cater it to one resource. For a while, I was running it in full production for raw materials. I'm now converting it over to a factory because I want that 30% raw material production increase from, what's it called? The miner's workshop. You might end up in a dilemma where you've got something like this in a miner settlement. You should almost always go for whatever that boon is. For instance, this particular one allows me to recruit demon smiths, sorcerers in all provinces. That's huge. You no longer have to produce the building chain, which is this one here. You no longer have to build that to be able to access your demon smiths. So particularly if you're running a lot of your overseers, then that can be a very impactful one. Obviously, you should nix one of your other spots for something that produces you that kind of return in the form of the volcanic deposits. Like, that's a no-brainer. You should deviate from your standard build stuff to be able to acquire that. And as you can see, this was being used as a defensive position, but given where it's located now, probably going to delete that Dreadquake battery because we're not likely to have a problem in this region because we've essentially killed the dwarves. We're about to take out Skarsnik here. The dwarves have one position left. Skarsnik has probably 5 settlements that we need to take out. And then we basically own the whole region. We don't really have to worry about them jumping over here because we're going to have armies in the region. And then the last thing I want to talk about is your tier 5 settlements. If you have a tier 5 settlement like Zarnagrand here, which is one that I just actually confederated last turn, I had to do some destruction because I had some buildings here that weren't really worth it. These buildings, I don't really find them all that advantageous to have, but they had some other ones here that didn't make a whole lot of sense. So when we get to tier 5, if it's not a position that needs to be defended, again, this one is centrally located. This province is not coming under attack anytime soon. It does not need those defenses. I'm going for our raw material consumption reduction and extra conclave influence, because being able to bring those settlements up to tier 5 right from the get-go, it's really advantageous. So in the late game, you can see, like even in the mid game right now, I'm producing 300 conclave influence per turn. I've got one more confederation to be had here, and I've literally could have done it turns ago, but I staved it off because I wanted Zatan to take over this whole region here and have some time to build up those provinces so I didn't have to pay for it. And he's well on his way to doing that. I'm probably going to confederate him here pretty soon, unless I find some settlements that I really need to pump up to tier 5, like, or 4 for that matter, like this region. You can see that I've taken this and I've pumped this up all the way to tier 5 because I wanted to be able to get these buildings at first the garrison at higher level. Probably going to spend some labor resources to pump this all the way up and probably complete the Dreadquake battery, because I've got some armies in the region, but they're spread a little bit thin. And I know that having taken out Vlad last turn or so, that he's going to be respawning in this region. And some of these settlements, while they may be low level, he's going to be able to raise the dead in those areas and come at me hard with full stacks acquired from his wars with the Empire. You can see here, same thing. I've taken this position, and it's costing me like 375 conclave influence to do. So going after that this building here to get you that extra conclave influence plus 10 every single turn, you're going to be able to take those settlements at very high level and really make the creep of your empire impregnable. Anyway, I have run way over. I got really talkative on this one. If you learned something or you have a differing perspective on how you think that you ought to be building the provinces, then please let me know, because I'm just some guy who plays a lot of Total War Warhammer 3. And you may play just as much or more than I do. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you on another video here at the Art of Scumming.